The October wind whipped through the alley, carrying the scent of damp leaves and distant cooking fires. Reverend Elijah Anderson huddled deeper into his threadbare coat, the worn fabric offering little protection against the chill. He wasn't used to the cold, not anymore. Years spent in the warmth of the church, surrounded by the comforting sounds of hymns and the murmur of prayer, felt like a distant dream. Now, the symphony of the city, the screech of tires, the distant wail of sirens, the muffled conversations of hurried passers-by, was his constant companion. Elijah wasn't always homeless. He'd been the beloved pastor of St. Michael's for over 30 years, a guiding light for countless souls. But after his retirement, a quiet conviction had settled over him. He felt a stronger calling, a need to serve in a more direct, less formal way. He'd sold his modest house, donated the proceeds to the church, and chosen to live a simpler life, closer to the people he served. His small apartment had become a storage unit for donated clothes. His meals were often shared with those less fortunate, and his nights were spent under the indifferent gaze of the city stars. He wasn't alone, not entirely. The townspeople of Havenwood knew him, respected him, even loved him. They saw him tending the community garden, sharing his meager possessions with the hungry, offering a kind word to those struggling with despair. They knew the stories of his quiet acts of kindness, the way he'd helped Mrs. Gable through her grief, the way he'd tutored young Timmy in math, the way he'd always had a warm smile and a listening ear for anyone who needed it. They knew he was a man of God, even if his pulpit was now the cold, hard ground. Tonight, however, the usual gentle hum of the city felt different. A tension hung in the air, a discordant note in the familiar rhythm of the night. Elijah felt it as he sat against the brick wall, his hands clasped around a lukewarm cup of coffee someone had given him earlier. 3 figures emerged from the shadows at the far end of the alley, their silhouettes stark against the dim glow of a street lamp. They were young, white men, their laughter echoing with a chilling edge. Elijah recognized them. They were often seen loitering around the town square, their idle chatter often laced with casual cruelty. One of them, taller than the others with a sneer permanently etched on his face, stepped forward. He was the ringleader Elijah knew. His name was Mark, or so he'd heard. Mark and his 2 companions stopped a few feet from Elijah, their shadows stretching long and menacing in the dim light. Elijah felt a knot tighten in his stomach, a familiar sense of unease settling over him. He'd encountered hostility before, of course, but this felt different. There was a malice in their eyes, a predatory gleam that sent a shiver down his spine. Mark let out a low chuckle, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Well, he drawled, look what the cat dragged in. A real prize winner. Boys. His companions laughed, their voices echoing off the brick walls. Elijah remained silent, his gaze fixed on the ground, his hands still clutching the cup. He knew better than to engage them directly. Experience had taught him that silence was often the best defense. But Mark wasn't interested in a conversation. He took a step closer, his shadow falling over Elijah. You know, he said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper, you don't belong here, old man. This ain't your place. His words were laced with a venom that had nothing to do with homelessness and everything to do with Elijah's skin. The casual racism, the easy cruelty, was a familiar sting. It was a reminder of the battles fought and won, the progress made, and the long road still ahead. And tonight, in the cold embrace of the alley, Elijah felt the weight of that road, heavy on his shoulders. The night, once quiet and familiar, was about to become something else entirely. Mark's words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken threats. His companions, emboldened by his aggression, began to circle Elijah, their laughter a cruel counterpoint to the city's nocturnal hum. One of them, a skinny youth with a nervous twitch, kicked a loose pebble at Elijah's feet. It skittered across the pavement, narrowly missing his outstretched hand. Elijah remained motionless, his gaze fixed on the ground, his breathing slow and steady. He was a seasoned warrior, weathered by years of spiritual battles. But this was a different kind of war, one fought not with words of faith, but with the brutal weapons of prejudice. Mark, sensing Elijah's resilience, shifted his tactics. He dropped the pretense of polite disdain, his voice hardening into a venomous hiss. He began to use words that cut deeper than any physical blow, words that sliced through Elijah's quiet dignity, words that aimed to strip him of his humanity. Racial slurs, laced with the casual cruelty of ingrained bigotry, spilled from his lips like venom. His companions joined in, their voices rising in a chorus of hate, their words a symphony of degradation. Elijah felt the sting of their words, not just on his skin, but on his soul. He'd faced prejudice before, in his youth, in his ministry, but this was different. This wasn't the reasoned bigotry of political discourse or the subtle racism of societal structures. This was raw, unfiltered hate, the kind that festered in the shadows, fueled by ignorance and fear. It was a hate that sought not to debate or persuade, but to destroy. Despite the venom in their words, Elijah remained outwardly calm. He knew that any outward show of anger or fear would only embolden them. He had learned, over the years, the power of quiet resistance, the strength found in unwavering dignity. He closed his eyes, focusing on his breath, seeking solace in the quiet sanctuary of his own spirit. He prayed silently for strength, for patience, for the wisdom to navigate this storm. The alley remained largely deserted. A few cars zipped past on the adjacent street, their headlights briefly illuminating the scene before disappearing into the darkness. The drivers, preoccupied with their own lives, saw nothing, heard nothing. Their minds were elsewhere, their attention focused on the urgent demands of their own existence. The young men's cruelty unfolded in relative anonymity, a hidden act of violence shielded by the indifference of the city night. Mark, sensing that his words alone weren't enough, escalated his aggression. He shoved Elijah roughly, sending him sprawling against the cold brick wall. The impact knocked the wind out of him, leaving him gasping for breath. His lukewarm coffee spilled, staining the pavement a dark, bitter puddle. The young men roared with laughter, their cruel amusement a stark contrast to Elijah's quiet suffering. Elijah remained on the ground, his body aching, his spirit bruised. He felt the weight of their hate, the crushing force of their prejudice. But beneath the pain, beneath the humiliation, a flicker of defiance ignited within him. He would not break. He would not surrender. He would stand firm, a testament to the enduring power of faith, hope, and love, even in the face of overwhelming darkness. He would show them, and the world, the true meaning of strength. The quiet strength of a man who had dedicated his life to serving others, a man whose spirit could not be broken by the venom of hate. The night was far from over, and the battle had just begun. Sarah clutched her bakery bag tighter, its warmth a small comfort against the October chill. She finished her shift at the Daily Bread and was hurrying home, the aroma of freshly baked sourdough still clinging to her clothes. She usually took the main street, but tonight, a detour through the alley seemed quicker. She'd always felt a strange sense of peace in the alley, a quiet solitude that contrasted with the bustling energy of the town square. Tonight, however, the peace was shattered. As she rounded the corner, she saw him. Reverend Elijah Anderson, slumped against the brick wall, his frail frame a stark contrast to the towering figures surrounding him. She recognized the young men immediately. Mark and his crew, notorious for their late-night antics and casual cruelty. She'd seen them before, their laughter often laced with a chilling undercurrent of aggression. But tonight, their laughter held a different tone, a cruel edge that sent a shiver down her spine. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She watched, frozen in place, as Mark and his friends continued their harassment. She heard the hateful words, the racial slurs, the cruel taunts. She saw the way they shoved Elijah, the way they kicked at his belongings, the way they reveled in his quiet suffering. A wave of nausea washed over her, a mixture of anger, disgust, and fear. She wanted to scream, to intervene, but her feet remained rooted to the spot, her body paralyzed by a mixture of fear and disbelief. Sarah had always admired Elijah from afar. She'd seen him tending the community garden, his hands gently coaxing life from the soil. She'd seen him sharing his meager meals with the homeless, his kindness a beacon in the city's indifferent darkness. She'd often watched him from the bakery window, his quiet dignity a source of inspiration. He was a man of faith, a man of service, a man who embodied the quiet strength that she so admired. And now, she was witnessing his quiet dignity being brutally violated. The guilt gnawed at her, a sharp, persistent pain. She should have done something, she knew. She should have shouted. She should have intervened. She should have called for help. But fear had paralyzed her, a cold grip that had stifled her voice and frozen her limbs. She was a small figure, a young woman alone in a dark alley, facing a group of aggressive young men. The thought of confronting them, of risking her own safety, had been too daunting. But as she watched Elijah's quiet suffering, a different kind of fear began to rise within her. The fear of her own complicity, the fear of her own silence. She couldn't stand by and watch this happen. She couldn't let her fear dictate her actions. She had to do something, anything. Taking a deep breath, Sarah steeled herself. She stepped out of the shadows, her presence a sudden interruption in the unfolding drama. The young men turned, their faces momentarily registering surprise. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, but she held her ground, her eyes fixed on Mark, her gaze unwavering. She knew she was small, she knew she was alone, but she also knew that she couldn't remain silent. She had to speak out, even if her voice trembled. The silence had lasted long enough. The time for action had arrived. Sarah's sudden appearance startled the young men. Their taunts faltered, replaced by a stunned silence. For a moment, a fragile equilibrium settled over the alley, a brief respite in the escalating tension. Mark, the ringleader, was the first to recover. His eyes narrowed, assessing Sarah, calculating the risks and rewards of continuing their assault. He saw a young woman, alone, vulnerable. He might have hesitated had she not been a witness to their actions. Now, she was a problem to be dealt with. "Look what we have here," Mark sneered, his voice dripping with a false charm that barely concealed his underlying menace. "A little angel come to save the day. Why don't you just mind your own business, sweetheart?" His words were a thinly veiled threat, a warning to stay out of their way. But Sarah, emboldened by her initial act of defiance, refused to back down. "Leave him alone," she said, her voice trembling slightly, but firm. Her words were small, but they carried the weight of her growing anger and resolve. She stood her ground, her eyes locked on Mark, refusing to be intimidated by his menacing glare. The other two young men shifted uneasily, their initial confidence wavering under Sarah's unexpected defiance. Mark, however, was not easily deterred. His false charm vanished, replaced by a raw, unbridled aggression. He shoved Sarah roughly, sending her stumbling back. The impact knocked the wind out of her, leaving her gasping for breath. The other two young men, emboldened by Mark's aggression, began to close in, their menacing laughter echoing in the narrow alley. Elijah, still weak from the previous assault, watched in horror as the young men turned their attention to Sarah. He tried to rise, to intervene, but his body was too weak, his spirit too wounded. He could only watch helplessly as the situation escalated, the violence spiraling out of control. His quiet dignity, once a shield against their cruelty, now seemed utterly defenseless. Mark, fueled by a mixture of anger and frustration, lunged at Elijah again, pushing him violently to the ground. This time, the impact was harder, more brutal. Elijah cried out in pain, his body hitting the cold pavement with a sickening thud. His head struck the ground, a sharp pain shooting through his skull. He felt a wave of dizziness wash over him, his vision blurring, his senses fading. Sarah, despite her own injuries, scrambled to her feet. The initial fear that had paralyzed her was replaced by a surge of adrenaline, a fierce protectiveness for the man she had come to admire. She didn't hesitate. She lunged at Mark, screaming at the top of her lungs, her voice a desperate cry for help. Her small frame seemed insignificant against Mark's larger stature, but her fury was undeniable, her courage undeniable. She scratched, she clawed, she kicked, her actions fueled by a righteous anger that surprised even herself. The other two young men, caught off guard by Sarah's unexpected ferocity, hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. Their initial confidence had been shattered by Sarah's unexpected resistance. The alley, once a scene of quiet cruelty, was now filled with a chaotic struggle, a desperate battle between good and evil, between compassion and hate. The night, once silent, was now filled with the sounds of violence, the cries of pain, and the desperate pleas for help. The scene, once hidden in the shadows, was about to be thrust into the harsh light of day. The struggle continued, a chaotic ballet of fists and feet, screams and curses. Sarah, fueled by adrenaline and righteous anger, fought with a ferocity that surprised even herself. She landed a few blows, managing to scratch Mark's face and pull his hair, momentarily distracting him from his assault on Elijah. The other two young men, initially hesitant, joined the fray, their actions fueled by a mixture of anger and fear. The alley, once a place of quiet solitude, was now a scene of brutal violence. Despite the chaos, Sarah's mind remained remarkably clear. As she struggled against Mark's grasp, her eyes fell upon Elijah's face. The blood, the dirt, the pain, all of it obscured the man's features, but something familiar sparked in her memory. It was his eyes, the kind eyes that had always held a profound gentleness, a deep compassion. It was the eyes of the man who tended the community garden, the man who shared his meager meals with the homeless, the man who always had a kind word and a listening ear. It was the eyes of Reverend Elijah Anderson. A wave of shock washed over Sarah. She had been fighting to protect a homeless man, a man she had assumed to be just another victim of the city's indifference. And now, she realized the truth. The man she was defending was Reverend Elijah Anderson, the beloved retired pastor of St. Michael's, a figure of immense respect and reverence within the community. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, leaving her breathless and speechless. She stopped fighting, her body suddenly drained of its adrenaline-fueled energy. The other two young men, sensing a shift in the dynamics, also paused, their aggression momentarily waning. Mark, still grappling with Sarah, looked down at Elijah's face, his own expression shifting from anger to confusion. He, too, recognized the man beneath the blood and dirt. "Reverend Anderson?" Mark stammered, his voice barely a whisper. The question hung in the air, a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. The other two young men stared in stunned silence, their faces reflecting a mixture of shock and shame. Their casual cruelty, their thoughtless aggression, had been directed at a man they deeply respected, a man they had admired from afar. The revelation hung heavy in the air, a palpable shift in the atmosphere. The alley, once filled with the sounds of violence, was now filled with a stunned silence, broken only by the ragged gasps for breath. Mark's swagger had vanished, replaced by a look of utter disbelief. He had mistaken Elijah's simple life for weakness, his quiet humility for defenselessness. He had unleashed his hatred upon a man who had dedicated his life to serving others, a man who embodied the very essence of compassion and forgiveness. The weight of their actions crashed down upon them, the full impact of their cruelty finally sinking in. They had attacked a man they respected, a man they admired, a man who represented everything they claimed to believe in. Their casual racism, their thoughtless aggression, had been directed at a man who had dedicated his life to serving their community. The realization was a crushing blow, a stark reminder of their own hypocrisy and the depth of their error. The night, once filled with the sounds of violence, was now filled with the silence of profound regret. The news spread like wildfire. Sarah, shaken but resolute, recounted the events to anyone who would listen. Her story, initially whispered in hushed tones, quickly escalated into a roar of outrage. The initial shock gave way to a wave of anger, a collective sense of betrayal and shame. How could this happen? How could such a respected member of the community be subjected to such cruelty? The question echoed through the town, fueling a growing sense of indignation. Sarah's account, initially shared with a few close friends and colleagues, quickly spread through the town's intricate network of relationships. Word of mouth, fueled by a shared sense of outrage, amplified the story, transforming a personal tragedy into a community crisis. The bakery, where Sarah worked, became a central hub for the spreading news. Customers, initially drawn by the aroma of freshly baked bread, found themselves caught up in the unfolding drama, their conversations shifting from daily routines to the shocking events of the previous night. Social media, that ubiquitous amplifier of modern life, played its part in accelerating the spread of the news. Sarah's story, initially shared in private messages and hushed conversations, quickly migrated to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Posts, comments, and shares multiplied exponentially, transforming a local incident into a national story. The hashtag Justice for Reverend Elijah began trending, a digital testament to the growing outrage. The town's close-knit community structure amplified the spread of the news. Havenwood, despite its modern amenities, retained a strong sense of community, a network of relationships that transcended the digital realm. News traveled through churches, schools, community centers, and local businesses. It was shared during morning coffees, evening dinners, and late-night chats. It permeated every aspect of life, transforming the town's collective consciousness. The initial shock gave way to a collective sense of shame. How could such a thing happen in their town? How could they have allowed such cruelty to unfold, unnoticed and unchecked? The question hung heavy in the air, a collective burden shared by the community. The incident was no longer just a personal tragedy. It was a reflection of their own failings, a mirror reflecting their own complicity in a system that allowed such injustices to occur. The outrage was not confined to Havenwood. News outlets, both local and national, picked up the story, amplifying the outrage and demanding accountability. The incident became a symbol of broader societal issues, a stark reminder of the pervasive nature of racism and the urgent need for social justice. The story of Reverend Elijah Anderson, once a quiet tale of faith and service, had become a powerful narrative of injustice and resistance, a testament to the strength of community and the enduring power of the human spirit. The town of Havenwood, once a quiet haven, was now at the center of a national conversation, a conversation that would force them to confront their own prejudices and redefine their collective identity. The outpouring of support was immediate and overwhelming. Havenwood, a town known for its quiet charm and close-knit community, responded with a force that surprised even the most optimistic observers. The initial shock and outrage quickly transformed into a wave of compassion and solidarity, a collective effort to heal the wounds inflicted upon Reverend Elijah Anderson and the community itself. News of the attack spread rapidly, reaching every corner of the town. People who had only known Elijah from a distance, those who had simply admired his quiet acts of service, felt a profound sense of shame and outrage. They couldn't believe that such a thing had happened in their town, to such a respected member of their community. The incident had shaken them to their core, forcing them to confront their own complicity in a system that allowed such injustices to occur. The response was swift and decisive. Donations began pouring in, money and goods flooding into the local church, St. Michael's, which had become a central hub for the community's efforts. People brought food, clothing, and blankets, their generosity a testament to their deep respect for Elijah and their collective shame at the incident. The church, once a place of quiet contemplation, was now bustling with activity, a testament to the town's collective response. Offers of help came from every corner of the community. Local businesses offered free services, from medical care to legal assistance. Volunteers stepped forward, offering their time and skills to assist in any way possible. The town's mayor, a pragmatic politician known for his measured responses, expressed his profound shame and outrage, pledging the town's full support for Elijah and his rehabilitation. The local newspaper, the Havenwood Gazette, dedicated its front page to the story, publishing a heartfelt apology to Elijah and a condemnation of the perpetrators. The article highlighted Elijah's quiet acts of service, his unwavering faith, and his profound impact on the community. It served as a powerful reminder of the man's character and a stark contrast to the cruelty he had endured. The incident, initially a source of shame and outrage, had inadvertently revealed the depth of the community's love and respect for Elijah. People who had only known him from a distance, those who had simply admired his quiet acts of service, now felt a profound connection to the man, a sense of shared responsibility for his well-being. The town's collective response was a testament to the power of community, a powerful affirmation of the bonds that held them together. The outpouring of support was not just a response to the attack. It was a reaffirmation of the town's values, a collective commitment to justice and compassion. It was a powerful reminder that even in the face of hatred and violence, the human spirit could prevail, fueled by the unwavering strength of community and the enduring power of love. The town of Havenwood, once shaken by an act of cruelty, was now united in its determination to heal, to repair the damage, and to reaffirm its commitment to justice and compassion. The incident, though deeply painful, had inadvertently strengthened the bonds of community, forging a deeper connection between its members and reaffirming their shared values. The community meeting was held in the town hall, a large historic building that had witnessed countless gatherings over the years. Tonight, however, the atmosphere was different, charged with a potent mix of anger, sadness, and a quiet determination. The hall was packed, every seat filled, every standing space occupied. People had come from all walks of life, united by a shared sense of outrage and a desire for justice. Mark, accompanied by his two friends, sat at the front of the hall, their faces pale and drawn. They looked small and insignificant, their initial swagger replaced by a palpable sense of fear and shame. The weight of the community's collective anger bore down on them, a palpable pressure that seemed to suffocate them. They had expected anger, but the depth of the community's response had taken them by surprise. The meeting began with a prayer, led by the town's interim pastor, a woman known for her calm demeanor and unwavering faith. Her words, though soft-spoken, carried a powerful message of hope and healing, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, the human spirit could prevail. Her prayer set the tone for the evening, a call for compassion and understanding, even amidst the justifiable anger. Then, the floor was opened to the community. One by one, people stepped forward, their voices trembling with emotion. Some spoke of their outrage, their anger at the senseless violence inflicted upon Reverend Elijah Anderson. Others spoke of their shame, their regret at having allowed such an incident to occur in their town. Still others spoke of their love and admiration for Elijah, their gratitude for his quiet acts of service, their unwavering faith in his resilience. The speakers were diverse, representing the town's varied demographics and perspectives. There were young and old, rich and poor, black and white. Their voices, though different, were united by a shared sense of purpose, a collective determination to ensure that such an incident would never happen again. Their words were a powerful testament to the strength of the community, a demonstration of their collective resolve to confront the issue of racism head-on. Mark and his friends sat silently, their heads bowed, their faces reflecting a growing sense of remorse. They had expected anger, but they had not anticipated the depth of the community's compassion, the unwavering support for Elijah, the collective determination to heal the wounds inflicted upon their town. The anger was there, certainly, but it was tempered by a profound sense of empathy, a desire to understand, to forgive, and to move forward together. The meeting continued for hours, a marathon of emotions and perspectives. The anger was palpable, but so was the compassion, the desire for healing, the commitment to justice. By the end of the evening, a sense of unity had emerged, a collective resolve to confront the issues that had led to the incident and to build a stronger, more just community. The confrontation had been intense, but it had also been transformative, a powerful catalyst for change. The town of Havenwood, once shaken by an act of cruelty, was now united in its determination to heal, to repair the damage, and to reaffirm its commitment to justice and compassion. The community meeting left Mark reeling. Initially, He'd been defensive, his anger fueled by a mixture of guilt and fear. He'd expected anger, perhaps even violence, but the depth of the community's response had taken him completely by surprise. The outpouring of support for Reverend Elijah Anderson, the collective shame expressed by the townspeople, the unwavering commitment to justice, it all struck him with the force of a physical blow. He'd gone into the meeting expecting a confrontation, a battle of wills. He'd braced himself for a torrent of accusations, a wave of righteous anger. He'd even prepared a defense, a justification for his actions, a way to minimize his culpability. But the reality was far more complex, far more nuanced, far more devastating. The speakers at the meeting hadn't just condemned his actions. They had also spoken of Elijah's life, his quiet acts of service, his unwavering faith, his profound impact on the community. He heard stories he'd never known, tales of kindness and compassion, acts of selflessness that had touched countless lives. He learned of Elijah's dedication to the community garden, his tireless work with the homeless, his unwavering support for those in need. He heard stories of how Elijah had helped people through their darkest hours, offering comfort, guidance, and unwavering support. The more he heard, the more Mark's carefully constructed defenses crumbled. His initial anger and defensiveness began to give way to a growing sense of shame and remorse. He realized the depth of his error, the magnitude of his cruelty. He had attacked a man he respected, a man he admired, a man who embodied everything he claimed to believe in. His casual racism, his thoughtless aggression, had been directed at a man who had dedicated his life to serving their community. The weight of his actions pressed down on him, crushing him under the burden of his guilt. He had acted out of ignorance, out of prejudice, out of a casual cruelty that had become second nature. But now, confronted with the reality of his actions, he saw the depth of his error, the profound impact of his cruelty. He saw the man he had hurt, the community he had betrayed, the values he had violated. He looked at his two friends, their faces mirroring his own shame and remorse. They, too, were grappling with the consequences of their actions, the weight of their collective guilt. They had acted together, sharing in the cruelty, the violence, the hatred. Now, they shared in the shame, the remorse, the profound regret. As the meeting progressed, Mark's initial defensiveness gave way to a growing sense of self-awareness. He began to understand the depth of his prejudice, the insidious nature of his ingrained biases. He saw the way his casual cruelty had been fueled by ignorance and fear, by a lack of understanding and empathy. He began to see the error of his ways, the need for change, the importance of redemption. The night had begun with casual cruelty, but it was ending with a profound reckoning, a painful but necessary confrontation with the consequences of his actions. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but Mark knew that he had to begin the journey of self-reflection and change. The following Sunday, Mark, accompanied by his two friends, stood before the congregation of St. Michael's. The church, usually filled with the comforting sounds of hymns and prayer, was unusually quiet, the silence punctuated only by the occasional sniffle or whispered prayer. The air was thick with anticipation, a mixture of hope and trepidation. The community had gathered, not to condemn, but to witness a potential act of redemption. Mark stood before the congregation, his face pale, his body trembling slightly. He looked at Elijah, who sat quietly in the front row, his face bearing the marks of the recent assault, but his eyes radiating a quiet strength and unwavering compassion. He looked at the congregation, their faces a mixture of anger, sadness, and a cautious hope. He cleared his throat, his voice barely a whisper at first. "I stand before you today," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "to offer my sincerest apologies for my actions. There are no words to express the depth of my regret, the profound shame I feel for the cruelty I inflicted upon Reverend Elijah Anderson and the pain I caused this community." His voice grew stronger, steadier, as he continued. He spoke not only of his actions, but of the underlying prejudices that had fueled them, the casual racism that had become so ingrained in his thinking. He spoke of his ignorance, his fear, his lack of empathy. He spoke of the way his casual cruelty had been fueled by a deep-seated prejudice, a prejudice he had never truly examined or confronted. His friends, standing beside him, nodded in agreement, their own voices filled with remorse. They, too, spoke of their actions, their words echoing Mark's sentiments. They expressed their shame, their regret, their profound sorrow for the pain they had caused. They spoke of the need for change, the importance of self-reflection, the urgency of confronting their own prejudices. Their apologies were not empty words. They were heartfelt expressions of remorse, born out of a genuine desire for redemption. They were not seeking forgiveness, not yet, but they were seeking to make amends, to begin the long process of healing. They acknowledged the depth of their wrongdoing, the magnitude of their cruelty. They spoke of their commitment to change, their determination to learn from their mistakes, and their pledge to become better people. The congregation listened intently, their faces reflecting a mixture of emotions. There was anger, certainly, but there was also compassion, forgiveness, and a cautious hope. The community had gathered not to condemn, but to witness a potential act of redemption. And as Mark and his friends spoke, a sense of healing began to permeate the air, a quiet acknowledgement that even in the face of profound wrongdoing, forgiveness and redemption were possible. The apology was not the end of the story, but it was a crucial turning point. It was a moment of reckoning, a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, a commitment to change. It was a testament to the power of community, the strength of forgiveness, and the enduring possibility of redemption. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but Mark and his friends had taken the first step, a step toward healing, a step toward a better future. The community, in turn, embraced the opportunity for reconciliation, recognizing the potential for growth and understanding. Following the public apology, a hush fell over the congregation. All eyes turned to Reverend Elijah Anderson, who sat quietly in the front row, his face etched with the marks of the recent assault. He had listened intently to Mark and his friends, his expression unreadable, his silence heavy with unspoken emotions. The weight of expectation hung in the air, a palpable tension that seemed to suffocate the room. Would he forgive them? Could he forgive them? The question hung heavy in the hearts of everyone present. Then, Elijah rose slowly, his movements deliberate, his gaze sweeping across the congregation. He spoke softly, his voice clear and steady, carrying a weight of wisdom and compassion that resonated deeply with everyone present. He didn't begin with words of condemnation or anger. Instead, he spoke of forgiveness, of redemption, of the importance of community healing. "My brothers," he began, his voice filled with a quiet strength, "I have witnessed your remorse. I have heard your apologies, and I have felt the weight of your regret. The pain you inflicted upon me is real. The trauma is undeniable. But I also know the power of forgiveness, the transformative potential of redemption. I have dedicated my life to serving God and my community, and forgiveness is at the heart of both." He spoke of the importance of empathy, of understanding the root causes of hatred and prejudice. He acknowledged the systemic issues that had contributed to the incident, the ingrained biases that had fueled Mark and his friends' actions. He spoke of the need for education, for dialogue, for a collective commitment to creating a more just and equitable society. His words were not a dismissal of the harm inflicted upon him. He acknowledged the pain, the trauma, the violation of his dignity. But he also spoke of the importance of moving forward, of healing the wounds, of rebuilding trust. He emphasized the need for compassion, for understanding, for a willingness to forgive and to be forgiven. "Forgiveness is not about condoning wrongdoing," he continued, his voice gaining strength. "It is about releasing the burden of anger and resentment, about freeing ourselves from the chains of hatred. It is about choosing love over hate, compassion over cruelty, understanding over judgment. It is about recognizing the inherent worth of every human being, regardless of their past actions." He looked directly at Mark and his friends, his eyes filled with a profound compassion. "I forgive you, my brothers," he said, his voice clear and unwavering. "I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because I believe in the power of redemption, in the possibility of change. I forgive you because I believe in the strength of our community, in our collective ability to heal and to move forward together. His words hung in the air, a powerful message of hope and healing. The congregation responded with a collective sigh of relief, a wave of emotion that washed over the room. There were tears, certainly, but there were also smiles, nods of agreement, a quiet sense of unity. Elijah's forgiveness was not just a personal act. It was a powerful statement about the importance of community healing, the transformative potential of forgiveness, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. The incident, though deeply painful, had inadvertently brought the community closer together, forging a deeper sense of unity and purpose. The path to healing would be long and arduous, but with Elijah's forgiveness, the community had taken a significant step forward. The incident involving Reverend Elijah Anderson served as a powerful catalyst for positive change within Havenwood. What began as an act of senseless cruelty inadvertently fostered a deeper understanding and empathy between different groups within the community, highlighting the importance of recognizing the unsung heroes among them. The town, once shaken by the violence, emerged stronger, more united, and more committed to justice and compassion. The initial outrage and shame gave way to a collective desire for healing and reconciliation. Community meetings, workshops, and discussions were organized to address the underlying issues of racism and prejudice that had fueled the attack. The town council established a diversity and inclusion committee, tasked with developing strategies to promote understanding and empathy between different groups. Schools implemented new programs to educate students about the dangers of prejudice and the importance of respect for all individuals. The incident also highlighted the importance of recognizing the unsung heroes within the community. People who had previously gone unnoticed, those who had quietly served their neighbors without seeking recognition, were now celebrated for their contributions. Elijah, of course, became a symbol of quiet strength and unwavering faith, but others also emerged as beacons of hope and inspiration. Sarah, the young woman who had intervened during the attack, was hailed as a hero, her courage and bravery inspiring others to speak out against injustice. The local newspaper, the Havenwood Gazette, launched a series of articles profiling unsung heroes within the community, showcasing their quiet acts of service and their unwavering commitment to their neighbors. The articles highlighted the diverse contributions of community members, celebrating their individual strengths and their collective impact on the town. The series served as a powerful reminder that heroism could be found in unexpected places, in the quiet acts of kindness and compassion that often go unnoticed. The town's annual community festival, usually a celebration of local traditions, was transformed into a celebration of unity and diversity. Different cultural groups showcased their traditions, sharing their food, music, and stories with their neighbors. The event became a powerful symbol of the town's commitment to inclusivity and understanding, a testament to its ability to heal and move forward together. The incident also spurred a broader conversation about the need for social justice and equality. Havenwood, once a quiet town insulated from the larger societal issues, was now engaged in a national dialogue about racism, prejudice, and the importance of creating a more just and equitable society. The town became a model for other communities, demonstrating the power of collective action and the importance of confronting difficult issues head-on. The transformation of Havenwood was not immediate or effortless. It required hard work, dedication, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. But the incident, though deeply painful, served as a catalyst for positive change, fostering a deeper understanding and empathy between different groups, highlighting the importance of recognizing unsung heroes and reaffirming the town's commitment to justice and compassion. Havenwood emerged from the crisis stronger, more united, and more committed to creating a more just and equitable community for all.